A veteran's forgotten sacrifice. A small-town hero betrayed by the system. One act of kindness sparks hope, but will it cost him everything? Stay to uncover a tale of quiet courage and redemption. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, stories that give you chills. The morning sun barely broke through the fog in Willow Creek, a sleepy town where the diner's coffee was always bitter and the mill's whistle marked the hours. At 62, Frank Sullivan shuffled down Main Street, his faded green jacket hanging loose on his wiry frame. His boots, scuffed and patched, crunched on gravel. His gray hair was cropped short, his face etched with lines from years of labor and loss. He carried a toolbox, its handle worn smooth by decades of use. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, a familiar comfort. Frank's eyes, though tired, held a flicker of stubborn hope. He'd been the town's handyman since the mill laid him off 10 years ago, fixing fences, patching roofs, never asking for much. His wife, Mary, had passed 5 years back, leaving a void no job could fill. The bank was circling his small shop, the only thing keeping him afloat. Yet Frank still tipped his cap to neighbors, still left quarters for kids at the candy store. "Good morning, Frank," called Mrs. Carter from her porch, watering wilting petunias. "Morning, Ruth," Frank replied, his voice gravelly but warm. He didn't mention the foreclosure notice taped to his shop door last night. No need to burden her. He'd figure it out like always. His routine was simple: coffee at Daisy's diner, then odd jobs until dusk. Inside the diner, the smell of burnt toast and grease hit him. He slid onto a cracked vinyl stool, nodding to Daisy behind the counter. "Same old Frank?" she asked, pouring black coffee. "Keeps me moving," he said, forcing a smile. The diner buzzed with familiar faces, mill workers, retirees, a few teens. Frank sipped his coffee, staring at the chip mug. He'd served in Vietnam, repaired tanks under fire, came home to a country that didn't care. The VA checks barely covered his bills, and the town forgot his medals. But Frank didn't dwell. He fixed what was broken: things, people, moments. That was enough, or so he told himself. The day wore on, and Frank headed to the park to repair a splintered bench. The toolbox clunked at his side, a steady rhythm. Kids played nearby, their laughter cutting through the hum of cicadas. He knelt, sandpaper rasping against rough wood, when he noticed an old man on another bench. 80, maybe older. The man wore a threadbare navy coat, a veteran's cap tilted on his thin white hair. His hands clutched a tarnished dog tag, fingers trembling. His eyes were distant, lost in some private grief. Frank paused, sandpaper still. Something about the man's slumped shoulders tugged at him. He'd seen that look before, on soldiers, on himself. The park smelled of cut grass, the air warm with late summer. Frank stood, brushing sawdust from his jeans, and walked over. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, voice low. The old man blinked, startled, then nodded. Frank sat, leaving space, respecting the silence. "Nice day," Frank said, glancing at the sky. The man didn't respond, but his grip on the dog tag eased. Frank noticed a faded scar on the man's hand, a story untold. "Fix that bench over there," Frank added, nodding across the park. "Folks don't notice when things break till they're gone." The old man's lips twitched, almost a smile. "Like people," he muttered, voice faint. Frank nodded, feeling the weight of those words. He didn't push, didn't pry. Instead, he pulled a small thermos from his bag. "Coffee's not great, but it's warm," he offered, pouring a cup. The old man hesitated, then took it, his hand shaking. They sat in quiet, the dog tag glinting in the sunlight. Frank didn't know the man's name, didn't need to. A small act, a shared moment, that was enough. The old man sipped the coffee, his shoulders relaxing. Frank watched kids chase a ball, their shouts fading into the rustle of leaves. He sensed the man wanted to talk but wasn't ready. Frank understood. Some wounds took years to name. "You from around here?" Frank asked, keeping it light. "Was," the old man said, eyes on the dog tag. "Long time ago." Frank nodded, letting the silence settle. He noticed the man's coat, frayed cuffs, missing buttons. "Look like you've seen some miles," Frank said, gesturing to the coat. The old man chuckled, a dry sound. "More than I'd like." Frank smiled, feeling a thread of connection. He didn't ask about the dog tag, though he wondered. Instead, he shared a story of his own. A tank breaking down in the jungle, his unit laughing through the mud. The old man listened, his eyes softening. When the coffee was gone, Frank stood. "Gotta finish that bench," he said. "But I'm around. Same time tomorrow?" The old man nodded, a faint spark in his gaze. Frank walked back to his work, the toolbox heavier now, but his heart lighter. He didn't see the old man slip the dog tag into his pocket, or the way his fingers lingered, as if letting go of something heavy. The next morning, Frank returned to the park, his boots damp from dew. The air carried the scent of fresh bread from the bakery nearby. He spotted the old man on the same bench, navy coat buttoned tight against the chill. Frank's toolbox clunked as he approached, a familiar sound. "Morning," Frank said, setting his bag down. The old man looked up, his white hair catching the dawn light. "Sergey." "Sergey," he said softly, offering his name like a gift. Frank nodded, sitting beside him. "Frank." They shared coffee again, the thermos passing between them. Sergey's hands were steadier, with him, the dog tag tucked away. Frank noticed a pin on Sergey's coat, a faded eagle, military. "Marines?" Frank asked, gesturing to the pin. Sergey nodded. "Korea. 50 Wutu," Frank whistled low. "Tough years." He shared a story of Vietnam, the heat, the fear. Sergey listened, then spoke of frostbitten nights, friends lost. Their words were spare, but heavy, each sentence a bridge. Frank didn't push, letting Sergey set the pace. He fixed a wobbly table nearby, his hammer tapping rhythmically. Sergey watched, his eyes tracking Frank's steady hands. "You fix everything?" Sergey asked, a hint of humor. "Try to," Frank said, grinning. He handed Sergey a sandpaper scrap. "Want to help?" Sergey hesitated, then took it, his fingers brushing the rough grain. They worked in silence, the table smoothing under their hands. Frank felt the park's quiet wrap around them, a moment of peace. When they finished, Sergey's face had a new lightness. "Feels good," he said, voice stronger. Frank nodded, sensing Sergey's story was bigger than he let on. He didn't ask about the dog tag or why Sergey seemed so alone. Some things you earn the right to know. Word spread in Willow Creek about Frank's time with the old veteran. At the diner, Daisy leaned over the counter, her apron stained with flour. "Folks say you're babysitting some drifter, Frank," she said, half teasing. "He's no drifter," Frank replied, sipping coffee. "Just needs a friend." Some nodded approval. Miss Carter left cookies for Sergey at the park. Others weren't so kind. Tom Haskell, the bank manager, scoffed at the hardware store. "Frank's got no business wasting time on strays," he said, loud enough for Frank to hear. "He's got debts to pay." Frank ignored it, buying nails for a fence job. But the whispers grew. At the barber shop, old-timers muttered about outsiders taking up space. "Probably a con," one said, clipping scissors snapping. Frank's friend Pete, a mill worker, pulled him aside outside the post office. "People talk, Frank. Say you're neglecting jobs for that old guy." Frank's jaw tightened. "They can talk. Man's got no one." Pete shrugged, uneasy. "Just watch your back." Frank felt the sting of doubt but pushed it down. He'd been judged before, called a dreamer, a fool. Didn't matter. Sergey's faint smile when they sanded that table was worth it. Still, the foreclosure notice loomed, a shadow over every step. He couldn't shake the feeling the town was watching, waiting for him to slip. One afternoon, Frank arrived at the park with a sandwich to share. Sergey was there, but his coat was torn, a fresh bruise on his cheek. Frank's stomach nodded. "What happened?" he asked, voice low. Sergey shrugged, eyes down. "Kids." Threw rocks. Frank's fist clenched, the toolbox creaking in his grip. "Kids don't do that alone," he muttered. He thought of Tom Haskell's sneer, the barbershop gossip. Someone was stirring trouble. He sat beside Sergey, unwrapping the sandwich. "Eat," he said, handing over half. Sergey took it, his hand shaking again. Frank wanted to march to the sheriff, demand answers. But Sergey's quiet pride stopped him. Instead, he pulled a needle and thread from his toolbox. "Let me fix that coat," he said. Sergey watched as Frank stitched the tear, his needle flashing in the sunlight. "Why do this?" Sergey asked, voice barely a whisper. Frank paused, thread taut. "'Cause it's right." Sergey's eyes glistened, but he said nothing. Frank finished the stitch, tying it off. "Good as new," he said, forcing a smile. But inside, anger simmered. He'd given this town everything, his labor, his loyalty. Now they turned on him for helping a man who'd served, just like him. That evening, Frank stopped by the sheriff's office. "Kids don't bruise old men without reason," he told Sheriff Daniels. Daniels leaned back, chewing a toothpick. "No proof, Frank." "Could have been an accident." Frank's voice rose. "An accident? He's 80. Daniels held up a hand. "Don't make waves." "You got enough trouble." Frank stormed out, the door slamming. He'd stood up for Sergey, but it felt like shouting into the wind. The pressure built like a storm. At the diner, Daisy stopped refilling Frank's coffee. "Tom Haskell says you owe the bank," she whispered. "Says you're dodging payments to play hero." Frank's face burned. "I'm no hero, just doing what's decent." But the words felt hollow. Tom Haskell cornered him outside the bank, his suit crisp, his voice cold. "You're behind, Sullivan. Keep wasting time, we'll take your shop." Frank stood tall, though his heart raced. Threaten me all you want, Tom. I ain't leaving Sergey to the wolves. Haskell smirked. Wolves? Look around. This town don't need your charity case. Frank walked away, his boots heavy on the pavement. That night, he sat in his shop, tools scattered, the foreclosure notice crumpled in his hand. He thought of Mary, how she'd believed in him. Was he wrong to keep helping Sergey? The town's judgment pressed in, Pete's warnings, Daisy's hesitation, Haskell's threats. Even Mrs. Carter stopped leaving cookies. Frank's chest tightened. He'd fought for this country, for this town. Now they called him a fool. He slammed the notice down, the sound echoing in the empty shop. Screw him, he muttered. But doubt gnawed. Sergey's bruised face haunted him. What if helping was hurting them both? Frank rubbed his eyes, the weight of it all pressing down. He didn't see the shadow outside his shop or the eyes watching from across the street. Frank woke to a gray dawn, his back stiff from sleeping in the shop. The air smelled of oil and sawdust, his tools silent around him. He grabbed his toolbox, determined to find Sergey. The park was his first stop, but the bench was empty. No navy coat, no dog tag, no Sergey. Frank's heart sank. He checked the diner, the library, even the alley where drifters sometimes slept. Nothing. The town felt colder, the streets too quiet. He asked Daisy at the counter, her eyes avoiding his. Haven't seen him, Frank, she said, wiping the same spot twice. You sure you didn't scare him off? Frank's voice cracked. Scare him? I was helping him. Daisy shrugged, her face tight. Folks say he didn't want your help. Frank stumbled out, the bell jingling mockingly. He sat on the park bench, the wood smooth from their sanding. His hands shook, not from cold but from dread. Had Sergey left because of the rocks, the bruises, or because Frank pushed too hard? He thought of Sergey's faint smile, the way he'd said, feels good. Now he was gone, and Frank felt the loss like a punch. He gripped the bench, knuckles white. Where are you? He whispered, voice breaking. The park was empty, the wind carrying his words away. He'd poured everything into helping Sergey, time, heart, hope. And for what? An empty bench in a town that didn't care. Tears stung his eyes, but he blinked them back. He couldn't break. Not yet. The next day, Frank returned to the park, hoping Sergey had come back. Still nothing. He worked on a broken swing, his hammer's rhythm hollow. Kids played nearby, but their laughter felt distant. Then he saw Tom Haskell across the street, talking to a group of shop owners. Their eyes flicked to Frank, their voices low. He caught words, troublemaker, drifter, liability. Frank's blood boiled. He marched over, toolbox banging against his leg. What's this about, Tom? Frank stood in the town square, his toolboxes at his feet, facing Tom Haskell and the murmuring shop owners. The air was thick with tension, the scent of rain on the horizon. Tom's smirk faltered as a new figure approached, a woman in her 50s, dressed in a sharp blazer, her dark hair streaked with gray. She carried a folder, her steps purposeful. Mr. Sullivan? She asked, her voice clear. Frank nodded, wary. I'm Ellen Carter, from the Veterans Affairs office in Springfield. The crowd hushed. Ellen glanced at Tom, then back to Frank. I'm here about Sergey Volkov. Frank's heart skipped. You know where he is? Ellen's eyes softened. He's safe, at a VA hospital. He asked me to find you. She opened the folder, revealing a photograph. A young Sergey in a Marine uniform standing beside another soldier. This was taken in 1952, Ellen said. Sergey saved his platoon in Korea, carried a wounded man 3 miles through enemy lines. That man was my father. Frank's breath caught. The crowd leaned in, whispers fading. Ellen continued. Sergey never spoke of it. After the war, he lost his family, his home. He drifted, carrying that dog tag. His brothers, the only thing left. Frank remembered Sergey's trembling hands, the weight in his eyes. He didn't tell me, Frank said quietly. He wouldn't, Ellen replied. But when those kids attacked him, he told a nurse about you, how you fixed his coat, shared your coffee. You gave him hope. Frank's throat tightened. Ellen handed him a letter. He wrote this for you. Frank's hands shook as he took it. The paper worn and creased. He didn't open it yet. Couldn't, not here. Ellen turned to the crowd, her voice firm. Sergey Volkov is a hero, and Frank Sullivan reminded him of that. Tom Haskell shifted, his face pale. The shop owners exchanged uneasy glances. Frank stood taller, the weight of doubt lifting. Sergey wasn't gone because of him. He'd mattered. That evening, Frank sat in his shop, the letter in his hands. The air smelled of wood and oil. the familiar hum of his world. He unfolded the paper, Sergei's handwriting shaky but clear. Frank, you saw me when no one did. Not a drifter, not a burden, a man. I'm getting help now. Because of you. Some follow rules. You follow heart. Thank you. Frank's eyes stung, tears falling freely now. He thought of Sergei's bruised cheek, his quiet pride. He'd been ready to lose everything, his shop, his place in this town, for a man he barely knew. And it wasn't for nothing. The next day, Ellen returned with news. The VA had granted Sergei housing and care, thanks to Frank's insistence on reporting the attack. But there was more. Mrs. Carter, Ruth's daughter, had started a petition to save Frank's shop. The signatures filled pages, Daisy, Pete, even kids from the park. Tom Haskell faced scrutiny. The bank's aggressive tactics were exposed in the local paper. At a town meeting, Tom stood, his voice clipped. The bank misjudged Mr. Sullivan's situation. His loan is restructured. The crowd clapped, but Frank didn't smile. He didn't need their applause. He needed Sergei to be okay. Later, Daisy slid a coffee across the counter, free. Should have trusted you, Frank, she said, eyes soft. He nodded, forgiving her silently. The letter stayed in his pocket, a tether to Sergei's words. He'd done right, and that was enough. Willow Creek began to change slowly like a river carving stone. Mrs. Carter organized a veterans' breakfast at the diner, a monthly gathering where old soldiers shared stories over pancakes. Frank helped set up, his toolbox always nearby. Kids who'd thrown rocks now mowed lawns for elderly neighbors. Their parents watching closely. The park got a new plaque funded by donations in honor of Sergei Volkov and all who serve. Frank hammered it into place, his hand steady. At the diner, Pete raised a glass one evening. To Frank, for reminding us what matters. The clinks echoed and Frank ducked his head, embarrassed but warm. He saw Sergei's face in every story shared, every handshake. The town wasn't perfect. Gossip lingered, and Tom Haskell still walked with a scowl. But there was a shift, a softening. People noticed broken things now, benches, hearts, and tried to fix them. Frank's shop stayed open, his tools singing again. He didn't feel alone anymore. Months later, Frank got a call from Ellen. Sergei was settled in a VA home, painting landscapes and art therapy. He'd sent a small canvas, a park bench under a golden sky, on the two figures sharing coffee. Frank hung it in his shop, next to Mary's old photo. Every morning he looked at it, reminded that one act, coffee, a stitch, a moment, could ripple. Sergei's letter stayed pinned to his workbench, its words a quiet mantra. Frank kept fixing things, but now he taught kids to wield hammers, showed veterans how to sand wood. His kindness wasn't loud, but it was steady, like his heartbeat. Willow Creek carried it forward, through breakfasts, plaques, second chances. Frank found peace, not in praise, but in purpose. He'd honored a veteran, and in doing so, honored himself. Frank stood in the park at dusk, his green jacket faded but warm. The bench gleamed, smooth from his hands and Sergei's. The air smelled of grass, the sky streaked with gold. He touched the plaque, his fingers tracing Sergei's name. A kid waved, toolbox in hand, learning to fix what's broken. Small acts, big ripples. What's your story of quiet heroism? Drop a word in the comments, hit that like, subscribe. Don't miss tales that spark hope.